Hi everyone, welcome back to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. Eric and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose. We are on the defense's case part, is it 26 or 27? I don't remember now. 27. And we are coming back from the morning break. So we just had like an hour or so session in the morning, and we're coming back from a 10:15 to 10:35 recess that was taken. So we're going to resume with Dr. Charles Morton's testimony for the defense. And where were we? I believe we were on direct still. And if you recall, he was he originally had testified the previous week in trial time, and now excuse me, now he's back on the stand and continuing his testimony because they've kind of been all out of order. So please hit the like button if you haven't done so already. We are going to get started here. This is, like I said, direct continued. So the court says, all right, we'll resume now. Miss Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Morton, we were examining the photographs that were part of Exhibit 304. Yes. And you've indicated the significance of the smearing inside each of Mr. Menendez's thighs and alongside the side of his left hand. Calling your attention to photograph 304B and C, is there some blood spatter evidence in those photographs indicative of Mr. Menendez being standing up at some point in front of the couch? Yes. There's some blood drops that are actually under his leg, his right leg, and you can see the edges of them in photograph C. And there's another photograph where he is no longer seated that shows fully where those drops are. Well, let me show you 331 and ask you to put that up in the center. Is 331 the photograph that shows that more fully? Yes. First, would you look at the photograph that is part of 304 and point out to the jury where these drops are that are under the leg? Yes, for reference purposes, you can see the drop right here at the front edge, the leading edge of the cushion, which is associated with some wiping. In other words, there's a drop there that subsequently has been either put, uh, excuse me, there's a drop there that subsequently has been either part of a drop that has been wiped and smeared up here, or which was smeared possibly by other blood-stained area. But it's partly a drop and partly a smear. And two, as you look at photograph B to the left of that, right under the edge of the leg, you'll see some dark area, and that is apparent blood staining, which corresponds to the area to the left as you're looking at the photograph. 331, Exhibit 331. Well, let's do this if we can, so that later on, sometime from now, when the jury's looking at these, they'll know what you're talking about. There's a big black, he says, I have a marker here. She says, the big black one? Okay, let's do this. The reference blood stain that you say appears to be a drop that was then smeared. Why don't you circle that on 331 and on B and put the number 1 next to it, and that's the reference drop. I've circled on B. I've circled the area that's the reference and put a 1. Actually, I put a 1 actually within the circle. Would you do the same on 331? You said this is 331? That's number 331. Just putting a 1 in that same circle. Now, the blood drops under that leg, under his leg on 304B. Would you circle that area and put a 2 there? Yes, they show partially under the leg. Well, you want to do it with an arrow on it, whichever works for best. And he says, I'll put a 2 and a line going to that one. Now on 331, you can visualize that area better, can you not? Yes. Would you therefore again do a line and a 2 to the blood drops that were under his leg that are perceptible in B? Yes, I put a 2 adjacent to that circle. What is the significance of the fact that there are, when you say blood drops, what do you mean by drops? Yes, you can distinguish drops, blood drops, due to gravity of a particular size of distinguished from spatter, where there is some force applied to it, and it has to overcome the surface tension of the drop to get to the smaller sizes, and that can be done through a number of ways, either by impact or by motion, such as wiping effect with the hand or something like that. And what you described as that both 1 and 2 were drops rather than smears or spatters? Well, they look like drops which have been smeared. They're very heavy in appearance and they show a rather dark color showing that they're drops. Are they consistent with dropping straight down? That then gravity drops that are then either sat on or something comes up against them and smears them? Yes. So they are the gravity type drops. Yes. And what does the fact that they're gravity type drops there signify with respect to Mr. Menendez's position at some point after he had been shot? That there was blood on the sofa before he was seated. So you couldn't have been seated there and then blood got there and then he sat down. Like it has to be the blood had to have gotten there first and then he sat down. So that indicates he had to be alive, did he not, before he was seated? Yeah. And therefore the notion that he received the leg wound while seated and dead is inconsistent with that? Yes. Now, if you could at least back up a little bit, there are 3 photographs on the right side of 304 F. The witness says F, G, and H. She says, good, thank you. And what's the significance of what's depicted in those photographs, which is mainly the carpeting to the right of the couch as we look at the photographs? Yes, I did a very detailed survey of these using Photoshop and looking at the photographs as well, and found that the area out here where any blowout from the exit wound on the thigh would have been, and I don't see any evidence of either the pellets or any blown out tissue or blood that I would have expected to see if that he were in fact in that position when that occurred. And does the appearance of the wounds to you suggest whether or not a full or close to full round appears to have created those entry and exit wounds? It would appear to be a full round. And if it were, as it appears, a full round, would you expect to see significant pellet and human tissue blowout? Yes. Now, does photograph F show something else by way of blood droppings that suggests that Mr. Menendez was standing up in front of the couch at some point after he was shot? Yes. And again, if you have the marker, could you first point and describe what it is that you see there that suggests that, and then circle them? Yes. There are a series of several drops here out in front of the arm area of the sofa on the carpet, and there are out beyond the area where the body is located, and these are drops down from apparently from a wound. Gravity drops? Circular drops? Yes. Okay, and is there one such area visible in that photograph or more than one? One area. And can you circle that area in that photograph? Yes, I circled it on F. Can you approximate how far from the couch itself that area of gravity blood drops lie? There isn't a good scale here. The scale is actually closer here. It looks like it's something on the order of 6 to 10 inches, but that's a rough estimate. Is there another area closer in here where there are individual drops as compared to the little pool of blood? Yes. I just want to say I feel like we've gone way into the weeds, and I mean there are things she's making really good points, but then there are things like he's these witnesses, let's be fair. This is a very long trial. These witnesses are on the stand for a very long time. This is, most trials don't last this long. This is like a 6-month trial. And I feel like we're in the weeds sometimes. But they really have to defend the position in the crime scene because it's so mutilated by like what Dr. McCarthy has basically said it is. And he's all over the place with his expert opinion. So they really have to hone in that he's wrong on a lot of his theories or, opinions, but I feel like we're getting a little too far out into details that I think the jury's probably lost, which if you're sitting there and you're not able to like pause like we are in between days or take breaks in between the days and digest the information, it's a lot different for the jury. So I think there might have been a lot of things that got missed by this jury just because of the amount of time that these witnesses were on the stand and the amount of information that they were given. So, anyways, just kind of a thought that I had while I'm reading this. Anyways, to those individual, were you here when Mr. Linhart testified that he believed those drops also indicated that Mr. Menendez was in a different position than depicted on the sofa after he had been shot? Yes. And do you agree with Mr. Linhart's assessment? Yes. So, would you circle those areas also on both of those photographs that show areas of individual gravity type drops? I've circled that on F and G. Okay, now just looking at 331 for a moment, that large photograph, yes. Do there appear to be circular areas on the top of the couch cushion in that photograph taken after Mr. Menendez's body was removed? Yes. There are a series, again, that would be under his leg that appear on the upper surface of the sofa cushion, but have subsequently been smeared by blood apparently during the removal. Do you have any opinion about whether or not those have any significance vis-a-vis whether he was standing and therefore alive at the point when he received the leg wound? They would certainly suggest that they were part of a drop pattern that resulted while he was alive, standing, but with the smearing over them, it's a little hard to say. Okay, you can resume your seat. Oh, you know what? You can't. I like her. Sorry for the snort. Um, you have to help me get this down for the moment, and we'll hold on to it for later. Just put it up for now. Let me just make sure of one thing, Mr. Morton. Have we discussed by now the significance of the images depicted in all these photographs? Yes, I believe so. Okay, one thing. Excuse me. Do you know what this circular disc appearing object is on Mr. Menendez's right thigh? That's a fiber wad. Is that how it was described by the Beverly Hills Police Department? Yes. Did you examine that fiber wad when you examined all of the ballistics evidence? Yes, I did. Would you circle on that photograph that fiber wad? Yes, I'll circle it. That's on B. Or do an arrow. It might be easier to show. I'll put an arrow and put FW for fiber wad. Okay. Is that fiber wad also observable without having to circle it again in C? Yes. Right at the edge of the shorts. That's correct. And are you aware, according to the Beverly Hills property report, that there's another wad also on his right leg, but it's not easy to see because it's on top of the dark shorts? Yes. So there's two wads on his right leg, correct? Yes. And this is 295. You can resume your seat right now, Mr. Morton. Now, 295 is a series of photographs surrounding the illustrations that failure analysis made of their hypothetical shot number one, correct? Yes. You have examined these illustrations and the report that described the hypotheses that went into that illustration, have you not? Yes, I have. Do you agree with that illustration? No, I do not. And how many specifics do you disagree with that illustration? I haven't categorized the number, but there are a number of problems with it. Like, I don't know the number, but there's plenty of problems. I didn't count because there's so many. And would you describe what the problems are with it? Well, when I say problems, does the physical evidence support or contradict what's depicted in that illustration or those illustrations? I think there's substantial evidence to contradict the failure analysis diagrams or illustrations. And would you tell us what is the substantial evidence that contradicts that illustration of one of failure analysis categorized as of one as failure? Let me rephrase that. Would you tell us what is the substantial evidence that contradicts that illustration of one as failure analysis categorized it? Well, primarily, the pathologist's description of the entry wound to the back of the right arm, the lateral side of the right arm, that's one of the main things. And it appears to be, in my experience, the appearance supports the idea that that's an entry on the lateral rear area of the right arm exiting across the chest. And that's confirmed by the appearance of the blood spray from that wound, which appears on both the shirt and left arm of Mr. Menendez. Now, you examined, did you not, Mr. Menendez's shirt more than once? Yes, I did. And does there appear to be an area with two large and one smaller hole in that shirt? There are actually a number of different holes in the shirt. I mean on the front of the shirt. On the front of the shirt, there are a couple of large holes and I think one or two smaller holes. And do you have an opinion as to whether or not those larger holes could have any connection to the two wads that we just discussed that were sitting on Mr. Menendez's right leg? Yes, they could. Those holes could relate to the wads or the pellets that pass through the right arm. And pass through in which direction? From Mr. Menendez's right to left. So at some point, he was not facing directly at the brothers when they walked in. I think he might have had his back turned and then he started turning and then that's when he was shot, across the body. I'm not sure. That's a total guess on my part, but that's kind of what I think happened. And is that something that you've come upon in the past where wads from a shotgun round can get caught up in clothing and then drop out? Wads, bullets, fragments of pellets, any of those things can get caught up and drop off later. If the hole in Mr. Menendez's shirt is on the right side of the shirt, would that be consistent with wadding going through there and getting caught up and then dropping down on the right side of his body? Could be wadding, could be pellets, could be tissue. Okay, but the question was wadding. So let's do this one at a time. Is it consistent with wads dropping down onto the right side of his leg? Yes. Now, the holes that you saw in the shirt, are they the kind of holes that you would expect to be made by actual pellets going across the chest area of the shirt from left to right? No. Now, you said you examined the shirt for the first time in what year? 1983. Not 83. 93. I'm sorry. Homicides happened in 89. First trial was in 93. We're in the second trial in 1996. Are you familiar with the testimony of Dr. Lawrence concerning holes in the shirt in the cuff area of the right sleeve? Yes. Do you agree or disagree? Well, first of all, you recall Dr. Lawrence indicated he was not a fiber expert. Yes. Are you a fiber expert? Yes. Yes, he is. Okay. I don't know how you become a fiber expert, but he says yes, under oath, he is a fiber expert. Fiber expert. Have you examined, well, how many pieces of fiber evidence over the years have you examined for the purpose of trying to determine direction of the causative factor of holes? I've looked at many hundreds of garments, interpretations of trying to establish direction. That's almost never possible. Sometimes a pathologist who sees the wound in its original position can make some judgment about that because the fibers are actually into the wound. But trying to do it from the clothing has been, in my experience, impossible almost always. So you So Dr. Lawrence's opinion is BS, in other words. And with respect to this clothing, this shirt, at the time that you saw it, did you see anything that suggested a direction to those holes? No. And when you first examined the shirt, what condition was it in back in 1993? It was heavily blood soaked and tissue soaked. And was it nicely pressed or on a hanger or boxed or anything like that? No, it was in a bag. How was it in a bag? Just rolled up in the bag, no particular way. Do you know what particular way it was first stored when it was after its removal from Mr. Menendez's body? No. Are there any records to show that any care was taken to preserve the condition of that shirt? No, other than drying it and putting it in a bag. So all they did was dry it and put it in a bag. Do you have any opinion about what happens to Why did my PDF just froze? Erg. Hold on. Now I lost my spot. Here we go. And do you have any sorry about that. Do you have any opinion about what happens to the or could happen to the direction of clothing fibers during the drying process when they're soaked with bodily fluids and blood? Yes. When something dries with liquid on it like that, like blood, it tends to dry non-uniformity. Uniformly? There's a capillary attraction basically as the liquids tend to flow to the areas that are drying fast, so you get some changes in the configuration of the fibers at the area of the defect, and they complicate any attempt to assess what the direction of travel is. So would it be fair to say, Mr. Morton, he's a doctor, Dr. Morton, that you didn't see anything in the condition of the shirt that indicated that the pellet holes at the back of the sleeve were exit holes or entry holes, either way? That's correct. Does the fact, however, that there are individual holes suggest an entry rather than an exit wound? Generally, that's where you see them. Yes. We were talking about the hypothetical number one here, and you said you had disagreements with it. You mentioned the arm. If the arm is, as you and other experts have described here, the entry to the back and the exit to the front, does that mean that number one is actually trying to affiliate shots coming from two different directions? Yes. And with respect to the depiction of the shot to Mr. Menendez's left elbow, do you have opinions that indicate that that's erroneous, the way it's depicted there? Yes. And what are those opinions based on? The If the shot to the left elbow occurred as shown in the diagram, I would expect, the arm might have dropped down and knocked the TV remote off the arm of the sofa. Would you expect, given the spread pattern on that elbow, that if it were near the remote would have been hit? I can't say because I don't know how close it would have been. Okay, now in your opinion, we'll strike that. Now you understand that number one also attempts to affiliate the breast wounds to Mrs. Menendez, the left breast wound. Yes. And in your opinion, could that breast wound have been caused by a shot column? To use the McCarthy thesis here, this is supposed to be you understand, this is supposed to be an entry wound according to his thesis of the dimension and configuration. Yes. And the back is supposed to be an exit wound? That's correct. And then whatever's coming out of there is supposed to have gone into her left breast. That's correct. The pattern on her left breast, is that inconsistent with that thesis? Typically, when some pellets go through, they spread out, they start spreading out, and so you'd have I'd expect to see a bigger spread. And is there a certain amount of uniformity in the spacing of the pellets on the left breast that's inconsistent with it having gone through and broken a humerus before then? Yes. Now, did you examine? So he does not think that the arm wound from Jose and the left breast wound are affiliated or connected in some way. Did you examine? You said you examined the clothing. Was one of the items that you examined the bra? Yes. And did you do something with the bra and then photograph it that suggested the direction of the pellets coming into the left breast? I photographed it and showed its appearance. I don't know that I could use that precisely to determine the direction. The pathologist would have to define based on the appearance of the entry and then where they ended up. The question was, though, are the entry holes that you saw on the bra that you illustrated in your photograph on the front of the bra rather than on the lateral aspect of it? They are on the left front. Do you have the photograph with you that you made of the bra? Yes, I do. And before taking the photo, did you do something to the bra so that you could have a meaningful picture? Yes, I put it on a balloon that was blown up. A blown up balloon? Yes. A colored balloon? Yes. So you could see the balloon through the holes? Yes, it's green. All right. Is that all bra? Yes. Maybe we should just keep it on the sheet. There's a sheet of photographs, Your Honor, in the. Mr. Khan says, I have not seen this, Your Honor. May I see it? Ms. Abramson says, certainly. The court says, we're at 337. Ms. Abramson says, yes, Your Honor, thank you. There are, let me just indicate what 337 is, Your Honor. 5 photographs mounted in a plastic sleeve. And on the front surface, what are we seeing? What do the 3 photographs depict? They basically show the strap of the bottom of the bra, the center front strap, and then the front of the bra. And one of them was taken from a lower angle, and one adjacent to it is taken at a little higher angle. And then on the reverse side, we're seeing 2 more photographs of the bra. Yes, basically similar photographs taken from about directly from from the front, sorry. About directly from the front. And the green thing that's showing through this is the balloon. That's correct. And that allows one to see exactly where the holes are. Yes. And aren't there some holes, especially this one, that appears to be actually to the right of the center of the cup of the bra? Yes. So, not all the pellets are actually on the left side. Some of them are actually, or at least one of them is to the right of the midline. Objection leading, sustained, objection, sustained. Can you tell us, with respect to the midline of the bra cup, I'm going to circle this one that I'm asking about. Is that a pellet defect, first of all? Yes. Where is that with respect to the midline of the cup? It looks fairly close to the midline or possibly to the medial of it towards the right. To the right. Yeah. Is there anything else about, well, first of all, with respect to the association of wounds, in your analysis of the physical evidence, can you hypothesize the possible association of certain wounds on Mr. Menendez's body with certain wounds on Mrs. Menendez's body? You can hypothesize it. I don't know how strongly you can support it. You can hypothesize the left elbow wound with the left breast wound. Okay, they're not inconsistent, is that correct? Right. Assuming there is an association between the left elbow wound to Mr. Menendez and the left breast wound to Mrs. Menendez, is it more reasonable or less reasonable, in your opinion, that that shared wound occurred when they were both standing versus both sitting? More consistent with them both standing. And if there's any affiliation, you're aware that Mr. Menendez has some injuries to the dorsal aspect of the right forearm? Yes. And if there's any affiliation between those injuries, say, and Mrs. Menendez's left breast, is that more consistent with them standing or sitting, or does that one not matter? He says, I can't tell. Now, is there evidence of blood spatter and other evidence that indicates that Mrs. Menendez was standing at the time that she received a wound or wounds to her left leg? Yes. Let me show you, first of all, the bag that's been marked 66. Are you familiar with, I haven't checked to see if it's the right bag. Yes, we're removing two items from that bag. Would you describe for the record what they are? Yes, they're a pair of shoes. And have you examined these? These are white tennis shoes, white canvas. And is your understanding, as is depicted in 331, as to whose tennis shoes they are? Yes. And whose are they? Mrs. Menendez. And are there marks on the shoes that you can see in the photograph, 331? Yes. Do you have an opinion as to what those marks are? Yes. Combined, there are blood stains that are show that that the leg was vertical at that time when dripped down. There's drips down on the left side, lateral side, and then across the front of the top of the left shoe. There's also one on the medial side back near the ankle that goes straight down. In addition to the medial side of the left shoe, on the left shoe, all talking about the left shoe. There's also blood drops on the top of the tongue, which is very close to the leg, uh, would be close to the surface of the leg, and would be difficult to get drops unless they strike the leg or come from the leg. Okay, so you're saying that those drops on the tongue indicate that the source of the blood is the leg? Yes. Let me ask you a hypothetical question. Is the pattern of blood that appears particularly on the left shoe consistent with, could be, it coming from the wound to her left breast? Some of it could, but it would seem to be that blood from her left breast would either be interrupted by her leg or would be out in front of her. Is there evidence, by the way, you just held up 331 again, of blood drops that if you assume Mrs. Menendez is standing in front of the second cushion on the couch, is there blood drop, or in that area, is there blood drop evidence affiliated with her position or positions behind the coffee table? Yes, there's quite an extensive series of blood drops that go across the front of the coffee table. And do those suggest a particular position for her? just that she was dripping blood down onto the floor, either from, I can't tell which wounds those could come from, but from above? Yes. She's not making those drips while she's lying on the floor? No. And with respect to the shoes, as in affiliation with her leg, does 331 show stain patterns on her leg that help form your opinion as to whether or not she was standing up after she received leg wounds? Yes. Let's put 331 up so you can illustrate that. Would you tell us what you can see in 331 that indicates that she was standing up after she received leg wounds? If she was standing, her leg was vertical, the blood drops on the front of the ankle right here that lead down to the top of the tongue that I've already mentioned. The blood drops on the side and the blood drops across the top all would be coming from above. And in this position, the blood would not flow down in that direction. There's no direct flow here, so this would be dripping down. You're saying in this position, you mean in the position in which the leg is shown in 331, it could not have been caused, it could not have caused those drops on the shoe? That's correct. And why is that? Because that blood would either flow down the leg or drip down off the leg, and it's not coming from this direction. Do you mean the blood that what appears to be the bloody area on the left leg immediately above would not, well, first of all, is there any contiguous pattern of blood from the bloody area? I mean, is there an area here that has nothing on it? Yes, that's correct. Okay, and so if the staining on the shoe was caused when the leg was more or less in that position, would you expect some connection, some staining in that area? Yeah. So does it appear that, well, let me ask you a hypothetical. Let's say, hypothetically, she was shot in the leg and then stood up, and the cuff of the pant was down around the ankle and then wound up down on her right side, pulling the cuff of the pant leg up. Is the pattern that you see there consistent with that hypothetical? Yes. Now, with respect to the right leg, does there also appear to be a pattern there that shows that the pant leg was moved after depositing blood? Yes, there's a smear across the back of the left leg. And does there also appear to be blood drops or accumulation of blood towards the bottom of that smear? There's a blood drop on the side of just the rear of the ankle, and looks like there's also blood on the right leg drops. Are you aware of any wound on her right leg? No. Do you have any opinion as to what's the source of the blood staining that appears to run the whole length of her right leg? It would seem to be from the wounds to the left leg. So no injury to the right leg, and there's blood all over the right leg, and that blood is from the left leg's injuries. And in discussing the wounds to the left leg, I think that brings us to 8. Does 8 depict one of the wounds to her left leg, the one that Dr. Golden called number 7? Yes. You testified on Thursday that although you did consult with Dr. Fackler about that wound, you had some tentative opinion about the direction, some tentative inconsistency about the direction as described by Dr. Golden. Yes. And you're aware now of Dr. Fackler's testimony, and hypothetically, if I were to tell you that Dr. Wecht also testified that the lower wound, as it appears in F on that, I think that's 319, 219, number 319, 319F, that the lower wound, this one, is the entry and the individual marks above are the exit, is that consistent with what your initial opinion was? Yes. Well, I don't know about initial opinion. I generally tend to defer to the pathologist because he actually looked at the one who did the autopsy because he actually saw these things in real detail. But the appearance, so I've considered the possibility that that was an entrance and exit, and his discussion of the edges of the wound suggested that that was an exit. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that that pattern that he was calling an entrance was too irregular for a direct shot from a shotgun. It would either be a rounder hole with some scalloping around the edges or a more uniform series of holes. In other words, the holes would be more similar in size to each other. Right. Such as we saw on your targets? That's correct. That the pellet holes for each individual pellet are the same size? Yes. And then you learned of Dr. Fackler and Dr. Weck's opinion about this? Yes. Objection leading. Sustained. The answer stricken. Miss Abramson says, did you learn then of Dr. Fackler? Well, first of all, did you discuss this wound directly with Dr. Fackler? Yes. And did you learn of his opinion of it? Yes. And then did you subsequently learn that Dr. Wecht also shared that opinion? That was my understanding. Yes. Now, is it also your understanding that both Dr. Fackler and Dr. Wecht and he, well, let's start with them. Dr. Fackler and Dr. Wecht have the opinion that this wound, number 7, may be affiliated with the gutter wound on her left calf, number 9. Yes, I did become aware of that. And do you agree with that, that they may be affiliated? I don't see anything that would refute that. Now, with respect to number 8, you're aware that there is a wound called number 8? Yes. Oh, by the way, if 7 is as you believe it is, and Dr. Fackler and Dr. Wecht, does that mean that C and D are backwards? The whole trajectory is backwards? Yes. So if Dr. Golden is incorrect and he's correct, and uh, if he's correct about the reversal of exit versus entry, then that means that those illustrations done by failure analysis would be incorrect. So those are the illustrations, correct? That's correct. Now you're aware of a wound that's called number 8 to Mrs. Menendez's left leg? Yes. And do you recall whether or not number 8, as compared to number 7, well, number 7 is on the lateral side of the body, the entrance wound, correct? Correct. And do you know if number 8 is on the medial side of the body or not? That's my understanding, yes. So that's more on the inside? Yes. And when we were talking before in reference to 331, in fact, I can show you the bottom of the feet, which is, this is 332. By the way, does 332 also show the staining on the shoes and the drops of the blood? Yes. And were you here when Mr. Linhart circled those areas? Yes. Calling your attention to all these dots and things that are in 332, what do those appear to be? Blood drops. And do they appear to be the gravity kind or the projectile kind? Primarily gravity, but some of them could be smaller due to a little bit of projection. In other words, movement of the leg, if the leg were to bump something that could give a little more velocity, and just gravity. With respect to both of those, do they suggest that whoever's doing the bleeding, and this is, well, strike that. Is this the direct proximity to Mrs. Menendez's body? Yes. And do the shape of those drops indicate that someone is bleeding while standing up? Some of them do, yes. Which means someone is standing up after being shot for some period of time for this blood to drop? Yes. Now, in your opinion, Mr. Morton, is the blood spatter evidence that you see with respect to Mrs. Menendez, does it suggest to you whether or not she received numerous wounds while standing up versus numerous wounds while lying down? Yes. I would say the evidence supports the standing hypothesis more than the numerous wounds being while she's down. So he is another one. I put my glasses on while I was on break, I braked for a minute and then forgot that I put my glasses back on. Um, So this is yet another witness for the defense that has decided or looked at the evidence and uh, come to the conclusion or opinion independently that both Kitty and Jose were standing during these initial shots, when at least when their leg wounds occurred, which the defense is trying to say that, as we know, the defense's theory is they walked in, their parents were standing. But the state wants to make it, and they've always played it out to be like, well, they were just sitting there in their little family room and watching TV in their little den and eating ice cream or whatever it was, or berries and cream, whatever it was. And which wasn't even true. And it wasn't even, there were dishes, but they didn't even coincide to like that moment in time and whatever. All of these things were like media spin. And here we just have so many individuals for the defense saying, no, the state's wrong. And yet here we are. All right. He says, yeah, it supports that. All of it being while they're standing, not while they're down. Does that have to do with these drops on the that we've seen on the shoes and the leg and the carpet? That and the shot through the door. And is there also areas on the coffee table? I'll show you what's been marked 15. Yes. And are there a variety of blood spatter patterns that appear on the coffee table? Yes. There are blood spatters that go off in a number of different directions, as well as a rather heavy smear at the corner of the lower, shown in the lower right hand corner of this exhibit. When you say they're spatters that go off in different directions, what do you mean? Yes, if you'll notice in the envelopes and the file folders that are here, there are some blood droplets going in what would be, if you use a clock face, some going to about 1 o'clock, is this one going to about 3 o'clock, this one going back up towards about 11 o'clock. There's just a wide variety of directions of these showing that there was either that these had been moved at various times or that they were different directions that these bloodstains were coming in. And would that support the notion that there's a variety of shots that are causing that blood? That, and possibly some movement of the objects in between. Yes. And movement, how about movement of the person being shot? Yes. Now, is there also, to your recollection, a number of pieces of paper, also envelopes and other things that wind up on the floor next to Mrs. Menendez's body? Yes. And do those pieces of paper also have blood spatter evidence on them? Yes, they do. And do those blood spatters have one directionality or a number of directions? My recollection is that there are multiple directions. And are there also pieces of paper on the floor that have what look like not drops, but actual smears? I don't recall right offhand. If you have that photograph, says the witness. Well, let me show you what's been marked 7 and call your attention to this area here. There's fairly heavy blood flow there, which may be associated with the blood flow that's on the corner of the table, and I wouldn't call it smears, but a large quantity of blood. It may be partially smeared, but the volume is so great that you can't tell how that got there. But it's not just a matter of a series of drops. It looks like a very bloody object was being rubbed on the surface, as it looks like on the coffee table. Yes, you were saying the coffee table appears to be flow rather than smear. I want to put the coffee table one up if I can. The witness says this shows a fairly substantial amount of blood that's been wiped around. I suspect that this is from her bloody right hand coming in contact. There's a large source of blood, and then there's movement in contact with the coffee table. And there's nothing in the illustrations from failure analysis that explains her right hand coming in contact with the coffee table, is there? That's correct. So here's another thing that's incorrect about failure analysis, why you can't even trust it, because they had, there's clear evidence in the crime scene of smears from Kitty's body being transferred onto the coffee table, and that wasn't uh, explained or accounted for in Dr. McCarthy's diagrams. She says, in fact, there's nothing in that illustration that would explain all of the blood spatter and smearing on that end of the coffee table. That's correct. Is there also a blood stain of some kind down on this edge of the coffee table right here? Yes. What type of blood stain is that? That looks to be a smear. So something came in contact with the edge of the table. Yes. And can you determine what it is or not? No, it could be some of the paper that ends up on the floor. It could be a hand. With respect to the paper ending up on the floor, is the appearance of the spatters on the paper consistent with the hypothesis that it could have obtained the blood spatters while the papers were up on the coffee table and then they were pushed off? Yes. Now, calling your attention to 319B, which is, or rather 319A and B, if you will. Yes. Could you describe what the blood stains in B, which is the couch cushion? What type of stain is that? Those are smears. And what can cause smears with that appearance? Or what relative to that incident scene could cause that? What in the scene could have caused that? She's basically saying. Any bloody object that wipes across that surface. Now, do you know what the concept of misting is? Yes, certainly. And would you describe what misting is when that's properly used? Misting is the basically what you get when you see atomized blood. That is, blood that is so receives such energy, typically in firearms cases, or you can get it if someone is bleeding and then coughing blood. You can get the spray that results sort of like an aerosol, and what happens is that forms a very fine spray pattern, and it's a very characteristic pattern where you have high velocity. Is that what that stain is in 319B? Clearly not. No. Did you find any evidence of aerosol spray or misting anywhere in this crime scene? There's some fine spatter that goes across that pillow that's on the sofa. I'm not sure I'd call it aerosol, but it's getting pretty small and is that kind of spray that you get from a pretty high velocity. And that's on which pillow on the sofa? That's the one that's shown between the two number stands, 4 and 6 on the area up here. Is there a series of spatter areas on that pillow? Yes. Were you able, in examining those spatters in the photographs, to make any determination about direction of any of those spatters? No, it has a general appearance as if it's going in this direction, but I would hesitate to be very specific about that because of the nature of the photographs. Well, if it were going in that direction, and the direction you pointed was as we're looking at the photograph from right to left, if we orient Mr. Menendez at the time he received his head wound on the sofa, it would be from his left to right, correct? Yes. Could that spatter then be affiliated with the head wound to Mr. Menendez? It could possibly be associated with that wound, could be possibly associated with the right to left wound that goes across his body, across his shirt. If he is standing in front of the couch, yes. Could be associated with that if he's on the couch. No. All right. Now well, it's 11:30, Your Honor. The court says, "All right, we'll take our recess until 1:30. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume at 1:30. The jury exited the courtroom and the following proceedings were held." So now we're going to have a little bit of discussion here from the attorneys. And the court says, we have a juror who's not feeling well. Oh, that's why we're taking extra time. How much longer do you think you'll be on your direct examination? Ms. Abramson says, not much longer, 10 or 15 minutes. The court says, any estimate now on cross? Mr. Khan says, I think the remainder of the afternoon. Hopefully we'll finish today. The court says, all right, as soon as the jury is cleared, I want the courtroom cleared to talk to counsel about something. And then whatever it was, those pages were sealed, so we don't know. But that's okay. We're gonna go move on for well, tomorrow we're going to continue on with a little bit more of Dr. Morton's direct, and then his cross will begin. So we will continue that tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Please, please don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. I appreciate it. And also, just know that I appreciate you just for watching. So thank you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.